Hello and welcome back to the Blockchain.com podcast. My name is Garrick Heilman. I'm the head of research at Blockchain.com and a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics. In this episode, we spoke with Simon Judd of the DAO Index Coop. Index Coop is a decentralized, autonomous asset management organization that produces on-chain crypto indexes. In our conversation, we explore what exactly is a DAO, what are some of the key benefits this organizational structure offers, and we cover the work of Index Coop, a blockchain venture-supported project. As a former Marine Corps officer, we touch on Simon's experience exploring the world of crypto while serving in the United States Armed Forces, and discuss the controversial question of whether crypto is somehow unpatriotic, as some have claimed. Well, Simon, welcome to the Blockchain.com podcast. We have a standard welcome question we ask all our guests. How did you earn your first ever money?
Hey, Garrick. First of all, thanks for having me on. Super excited about this. How I earned my first money. This is a very good question. I worked for a roofing company when I was 12. Hardest job in the world. I think I made $20 the first day, but I'm not doing that anymore, thankfully.
That is a tough job. Roofing, long hours, often hot. Yeah, that's a real way to earn your first money. Well, Simon, tell us a bit about yourself and kind of where you're from, what you did prior to getting involved in crypto, and then of course how you first learned about crypto.
So I'm from a small town in Montana. I went to college in New York City or New York State, philosophy major. After college, I joined the United States Marine Corps as an infantry officer. Just had an incredible 6 years in the Marine Corps. Was able to really see a lot of the world. Spent time stationed in Japan, Korea, Hawaii, and then I finished out my Marine Corps career as a mountain warfare instructor in the mountains of California. My first exposure to crypto is I remember I came back from deployment in 2017, and I had no real background in technology, no real background in finance, and we'd gotten back from deployment and we were in Hawaii, and I remember we were cleaning up, my Marines were cleaning their rifles. We were all just getting ready to go on leave, and some of my Marines were talking about this new thing, and they were just kind of hanging out, being hey man, do you hear about this Ethereum thing? It's a cryptocurrency. And I was what are these guys talking about? So, in 2017 on deployment leave, I spent 2 weeks just diving into Ethereum, diving into cryptocurrencies. And that was kind of at the start of the real bull run that happened in 2017. But at the time, I really had no framework for understanding either the finance or the technology. Up to that point, my full training was as a Marine Corps infantry officer. So, I kind of just, I held Ethereum, but didn't really understand it. So I spent 2 more years in the Marine Corps, and I decided to get out in 2019 to go to business school. And the idea of working in technology, the idea of working in crypto was completely off my radar. It wasn't something that military officers did in my mind. So I got out and I went to business school in New York City, NYU Stern, and I was really focused on becoming a big time investment banker in New York City. That was my goal. So I worked really hard in that fall, that summer, and I spent last summer of 2020, working at a large investment bank in New York City, Evercore Partners, doing technology M&A. And that whole summer, as it was happening, I was also diving really deeply into crypto, because for the first time I had the background in finance, the background in business. I could kind of start to understand it. And DeFi summer was happening, and I was just diving in. So I got back to business school, fall of 2020, and was very unsure if I wanted to pursue investment banking or if I wanted to see if there was anything out there for me in crypto. So, that fall, I got very involved in a few decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. And principally, I got very involved with Index Co-op right around the beginning when the community was very nascent. There were only a few of us involved. And I started working, just really doing anything that the DAO needed, whether it was writing, PowerPoints, doing modeling, doing some of our business development work. And like really within a week or two of working in DeFi, working in Web3, I knew like, I remember I was like, if you don't do this now, you're going to spend the rest of your life like trying to do this. Like you have to do it. Like this is what you need to do. So, late last fall, I called up the investment bank. Like my hands were shaking. I was like, I'm not going to do investment banking. I told them I was going to come back, and I decided to work full time for Index Co-op. And since then, I've been part of the core team at Index Co-op. I've been extremely involved across the entire organization. I led our recent $10 million seed round, which we're very, very lucky to have Blockchain.com on, and it's just been an incredible journey since then.
Awesome. So before we get to Index Co-op, I actually want to touch on your military experience and two questions. One, what what is your view on the attitude and feeling amongst maybe both active as well as inactive or retired military professionals about crypto in general? And the reason I ask this question is twofold. One is, one of the things that struck me early on, in the history of crypto was, USAA, which is a financial services organization in the U.S. for those who don't know it, who serves military families, exclusively military families, was an early investor in Coinbase. And I think part of the thinking there was that crypto could solve some problems for especially people deployed overseas who sometimes struggle to engage in financial transactions. They're in places that literally have no financial infrastructure, or it's really difficult for some reason, and so they saw some opportunities there. Integrated even, I think, Coinbase into the USAA kind of banking platforms. You could like see your Coinbase balances in your USAA app and that kind of thing. So it seemed like there were at least some military-focused financial organizations or interest from kind of the military ecosystem and the potential for crypto. But there's also this other thing that I want to bring up, which is that some people have accused being interested in crypto and Bitcoin specifically is somehow unpatriotic. And I wondered if you'd kind of run across that as well, and how you kind of reconcile these kind of two perspectives on crypto.
Yeah, so I think so. There's tremendous interest from military members, and I think the thing that drives that interest is the same thing that drives interest universally, right? Like people want an open financial system. They want like real ownership. They want to be involved in something where they can have like an actual stake in creating capital for themselves. And I think that is universal. And I think, one of the reasons cryptocurrencies are so popular with, so many members of the military right now is, some of that core orientation they have, right? Like there is a real bias for ownership, like a cultural bias of saying, you actually want, like, you own your work, you're responsible for yourself, you're responsible for your success or failure. And I think that really resonates with a lot of military folks. And I also think there's a bias for adventure, right? Like we are really on like the cutting edge of not just financial technology, but technology as a whole. Like this is a technology that was going to shape the future for decades to come. And I think, people who are biased towards adventure, are already biased for, getting outside the box and doing something different. It has tremendous appeal for them. On the concept of whether it is unpatriotic, I think there's two answers to that question. So first of all, I think a lot of the negative stigma around cryptocurrencies it is really going away, and it's really gone away over the last year. When I left the bank to do in business school to do DeFi, like it was this radical shift, right? Like nobody was doing that at all. Like it was It was the weirdest, strangest thing you could do. And now, a year and a half after that transition, like every single person I know from the MBA program, every single person from the banks have like reached out to me. Like we've done deep dives. Like the level of interest is just out of this world. So like a lot of that stigma is fading. And then I think also finally on the broader like geopolitical question of like, is it patriotic? We have in the Western world between, the large Western states, we have a tremendous lead in cryptocurrencies, and we have a tremendous cultural bias for decentralized, open economies, right? Like that is really what we have built our nations off of. And I view cryptocurrencies as like the next evolution for Western economies. And I believe it's something that we are increasingly going to embrace as a society.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more there. And part of the reason I mention or ask about this patriotic question is it keeps coming up. And in fact, like there was a recent, I think, talk that Ken Griffin at Citadel gave where he referred to Bitcoin as like a jihad against the dollar, and how he wishes all the crypto folks like you would be focused on improving the US dollar rather than building out DeFi. I think that view is really misinformed. And your view that that type of perspective on crypto DeFi, blockchain networks like Ethereum, Bitcoin, etc., is really outdated. Is the correct view, but still, powerful people, influential folks seem to continue to express this idea that somehow this is all unpatriotic, even though crypto networks, very much imbue the values: open, transparent, free access, that are embedded, in Western societies like the United States, very much aligned with more open, democratic societies, and certainly perhaps even a valuable instrument in kind of maintaining freedom around the world. And so I think that unpatriotic view is really incorrect. But let's transition now to Index Coop, and what is it, and what problem is it trying to solve?
So Index Co-op is a decentralized autonomous organization based on the Ethereum blockchain. And our vision is really to provide compelling, safe ways for people all over the world to gain exposure to cryptocurrencies. When you look back at the 1970s and kind of the evolution of passive investing over the last 50 years, it did an incredible amount to democratize global finance. And it allowed really everyday people to gain exposure to the global equities market in a way that really wasn't possible before. Before, you had to make very specific bets on certain stocks. You had to have like a really high degree of insider knowledge to make a profit. And passive investing changed all that. It allowed everyone to gain exposure. And, we see there being a tremendous, tremendous demand for the same kind of exposure in cryptocurrencies. It's so complex, it's so big. There needs to be products that give people passive exposure to broad baskets of different cryptocurrencies and allow people to, make investments that they can really plan their future off of without becoming day traders, without becoming, active everyday participants in the market. And we really see Index Co-op as the next evolution of passive management.
Awesome. And let's explain to our audience what exactly is a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization.
So a DAO at its heart is, how I describe it is an open source community. So, anybody can join, anybody can participate, and everyone is tied together by the Index Co-op governance token, which allows them to vote on major decisions that the project makes. And the real use of that is, we vote on what products we want to launch. And that means that we're really designing the products for the consumer, because the consumer is ultimately the one that's voting on it, making the decision on whether to launch it. And the real strength of these organizations is they allow people who are, cut off or unable to access traditional labor markets to participate in these really compelling ways in these open source organizations that really embrace people from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, and really allow people to contribute in a variety of ways to add value to the protocol. And that, over the last year, it's been incredibly powerful as we've seen people from all over the world get involved, start to support passive investing globally, and starting to bring our vision to every continent in the world, every background, and really spread our gospel.
Great. And DAOs have a really interesting history. They've been around for a number of years now. There's been some infamous moments in the history of DAOs. Folks should familiarize themselves with the 2016 Ethereum hack and how that kind of played out. And there's also some questions about their regulatory status. There's been some pioneering work done by attorneys and professors like Aaron Wright out of New York, who we had on the podcast earlier, who's been working with the state of Wyoming on some basically legal frameworks around DAOs. The SEC's kind of, I think, challenged some of that. We don't need to get into all that unless you want to go there, Simon. But yeah, DAOs are interesting but novel still. And I think one of the questions that comes up around DAOs or criticisms is that they're still reliant on relatively centralized infrastructure to operate. So oftentimes a Discord group is formed. Discord is a centralized platform for communication. And you get too many members in one of these Discord groups communicating and trying to make decisions, and it gets really cumbersome. How do you address some of these criticisms of DAOs, and how mature are DAOs at this point? If you think about a baseball analogy, like what inning are we in with DAOs?
I would say we're at the bottom of the first. Like I strongly believe that DAOs are, very close to what like the future of human organization will look like, but we're in a very, very nascent stage. And I think it's important to recognize that like nobody even fully grasps how to like effectively run these organizations, how they need to operate, how they need to how they can scale effectively, how they can grow. The issues you raise of communities being overwhelmed with people, with too much noise, becoming very slow, like those are very real issues that I think there's only, if you really look at the DAO landscape, there's only probably 5 or 10, maybe 20 DAOs that are really on the front line and really starting to solve some of those problems. We have been, since day one at DAO, we've been very focused on building it the right way, but it's certainly a challenge. And, I think over the next decade, as people become more comfortable operating in like fully digital, fully decentralized environments, we're going to see DAOs really start to be able to like effectively live up to their promise and, quite frankly, start to really begin to outcompete many of the larger centralized corporations that exist in today's economy.
Yep. No, I think there is definitely good reason to be optimistic and excited about DAOs, no question about it. And 100% agree with your point about this being still early days. So, oftentimes in crypto, we get very excited about, new things and their potential, especially when they grab headlines like we saw with the Constitution DAO quickly raising, I think it was some $40 million to try to place a bid on one of the few existing kind of early prints of the U.S. Constitution, raised a lot of like questions in that case around how effective DAOs can be in a competitive bidding situation like that, given that they're so transparent that the adversary bidder, in this case, our nemesis Ken Griffin of Citadel again, could see exactly what it needed to bid because the amount of money the Constitution DAO had raised was publicly available, and he knew exactly what price point to come in at to outcompete a DAO. So maybe not the most effective tool in a competitive bidding situation like that. but a really exciting vehicle for coordinating work in a new and novel way, and guaranteeing property rights and voting rights. And the voting question is something I wanted to talk to you about because a lot of people find voting very cumbersome. There's across the world, kind of oftentimes very low voting participation rates in many countries around, various elections. Or if you think about shareholder meetings, that again, a lot of shareholders either don't vote or, they proxy their votes. And I just wanted to ask you specifically around how you see um, voting today in the context of DAOs. And do you have any thoughts on where that can go? Do you think we're going to have something like proxies and people kind of delegating their votes, or does that really undermine kind of the whole point of the DAO?
So I think a big mistake we make in the Western world today is we view voting and certain forms of democratic decision making as like a panacea for all problems. And we say, hey, if there's voting, then it's good. If there's not voting, then it's bad. And I think where we really need to go, not just as DAOs, but also as a broader society, is we really need to be critical about what kind of decisions are best made through voting and what kind of decisions are best made through some other form of group consensus. Because what we see in the DAO very quickly is it's very easy for people to fall into the trap of like every hard decision, every complex decision gets voted on. And, we really see the inefficiencies of that within DeFi where, the hard decisions, the actually truly complex decisions are so complex that really only a very small fraction of the people who have voting rights have enough context to actually like make the decision and or give good guidance. So we really do need to really hone in on saying, hey, what are the decisions that really need group voting, that need group consensus? And then what are the decisions that need to be delegated? And what are the decisions that need to be handled through proxies? And, really recognizing that voting on everything does not mean that you're getting the best decision every time. And, as we really start to hone in on this, I see DAOs and DAOs starting to make much better decisions as they really focus on like, hey, these are the core things we vote on, and then everything else is handled through proxies or sophisticated parties that have the context.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And can you talk about how voting actually mechanically takes place? I think people who are listening to this who have not joined a DAO, I think it'd actually be really helpful for them to understand kind of like how it feels to be a part of a DAO, how this actually works in practice. Like what do you need to interact with a DAO, become a part of a DAO, and then how do you engage with it on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. I'll kind of just walk you through what happens and how somebody joins. Then we can talk about some of the specific voting examples. So it's very simple to join. We have a Discord that has an introduction channel. People go, they introduce themselves, they say a little bit about their background, and then our onboarding team contacts them and they join. Our new joiner call, and that gives them a broad orientation to the organization. From there, we have a number of small quests that new community members complete that both help the DAO through providing work, but also allow the new member to really build context on the organization as a whole. From there, as community members progress, they end up working in one of our nests, which you can think of as a different vertical, whether it's product, growth, engineering, and doing really specific work within that. And now, when it comes to voting, so each of our community members is paid in our governance token. And that governance token is used to vote on major DAO decisions. So a good example of a major DAO decision was our decision to do the $10 million treasury diversification that Blockchain.com Ventures was part of. We started the discussion in early February, myself and one or two other community members, really about the need for us to, diversify a little bit, diversify our governance token, bring on, major value add investors and, ensure we had enough capital to support like the long-term survivability of the protocol. So, we came to consensus that it was something that needed to happen. And from there, in early April, we held a DAO vote, which allocated a certain number of our governance tokens to myself and Regan Bozeman, who is another community member, and gave us the mandate of saying, hey, use these tokens to raise $10 million from investors. And it's really up to you how you do it. And then from there, we worked closely with the different investors to reach a good deal for all parties, and then it was executed. So that's a little snapshot of kind of how these decisions like flow through the organization.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. Let's spend some more time on Index Co-op, and you mentioned index investing as a major innovation in the investment world. Let's get into more of the details around what people are coming to Index Co-op to achieve, and what does the future look like for Index Co-op?
So right now, Index Co-op has 7 indexes that exist on Ethereum mainnet. And each of those indexes is built using token set technology, which is essentially, you can think of it as a basket of one ERC20 token that holds a number of underlying other ERC20 tokens. So a good example of that is our DeFi Pulse Index, which you can think of as the S&P 500 of DeFi, which is the 15 largest projects in DeFi, and it rebalances every month. We also have the Metaverse Index, which covers crypto and gaming. We have our leverage tokens. We have our Data Economy Index, which covers the data economy and things like Chainlink. And those are ERC20 tokens that people gain exposure to by buying on decentralized or centralized exchanges.
Awesome. So it's a way for people to gain exposure to some of these things in a kind of a broad basket way, like you would in a traditional kind of like equity index or Vanguard style index fund of that sort, basically.
Correct. And we see just tremendous demand for this kind of investing. A big focus of mine is I try and talk to, all our new community members as they join and have a one-on-one conversation with them and really dive into like why they got involved, what drew them to it. And the one story that comes up again and again and again is people say, I held Bitcoin, I held Ethereum, and for a year, 2 years, and then I started to dive a little bit more in. And the first thing I did when I transferred, Ethereum from a centralized exchange like Coinbase to my MetaMask is I bought DPI, or I bought one of the index tokens, because it was the only thing that, made them feel safe, made them feel comfortable. Everything else, it's too broad, it's too complex, it moves too fast. You need a way for people to allocate capital without having to, pull apart the underlying architecture of some of these more complex protocols.
Yep. And it definitely leverages kind of this old saying in finance that the only free lunch in the investment game is diversification. So, it's one way to cover yourself. Certainly, if from kind of single point of investment failure risk, or any one thing kind of going under, is to broaden your exposure to a wider range of networks and assets around some of these themes you mentioned, like DeFi, Metaverse, etc. So to sum up, some of the positives of DAOs, and I'd be curious if you agree with this list and what you would add to it. People often talk about the inclusiveness of DAOs, the fact that these are available to anyone, around the world with a computing device and internet connection. You can't be discriminated against as long as you have, access to the internet. You're able to effectively participate. These are efficient markets for innovation. You have governance rights, the speed of capital formation, lack of kind of overheads or central office. What would you make of that list, and what else would you add to it as kind of like a benefit of the DAO structure?
So I think the benefit, and it's something I talk about a lot, is, a traditional organization has one CEO, right? Or they have two CEOs. a DAO can have like 10 people acting in that role and be just as effective, making, really good high level decisions about, different areas of expertise they have. And it's also able to coordinate at a massive global scale in a way that I think the market in general has yet to fully recognize. I think so. Here's a really good example of that. At the start of this summer, myself and a few other community members decided that, hey, like we really want to focus on getting conference representation. We want to make sure that Index Co-op community members are at every major cryptocurrency conference, not just in New York or not just in the United States, but like every major cryptocurrency conference in the world. And over the last 4 months, like we've been able, in a fully decentralized way, without a single person saying do this, able to have different community members not only attend but be keynote speakers at cryptocurrency conferences in New York City, Miami, London, Paris, China, and like it's different people. And they're spreading the message on this very large platform, speaking for the DAO as representatives of us in this very major way. And it's all happening in a decentralized way. Those community members are being funded to go to speak at those conferences in a decentralized way. Nobody's voting on it. It's just through group consensus. And that is so powerful as it starts to scale. We have a very strong APAC team doing all of Asia Pacific, and like they were able to, get me on the major conference in China with over 10 million viewers. And, I was able to speak there. And like, those are the kind of opportunities that happen in a decentralized organization that, a traditional startup, a year into operation would not be able to create those kind of opportunities for itself and gain that kind of broad global exposure.
Yep. Let's talk about the Blockchain.com investment. Our venture fund invested in Index Co-op. Tell us about kind of seeking out venture investors like Blockchain.com versus crowdfunding, and the thinking and strategy around that, and how that capital is going to be used.
Yeah, so I think it's still very early in how these organizations interact with venture funds. At the start, we decided to be extremely selective with what partners we wanted to bring on board, and really focus on people that we felt had a similar vision for where DeFi and Web3 is going, and people that we saw ourselves working with really closely over, not just the next few years, but the next decades. And that's really like the time frame, we think in. And, from our first conversations with Sam, we were tremendously impressed by really like the powerhouse that Blockchain.com has built, the vision, and also just the willingness to really provide value out the gate. I think the old model of venture capital funds writing a check and then coming to collect their returns in 5 years is broken. I think it's over. And the venture capital funds and the venture funds that are really going to succeed in the next era of decentralized finance are the funds that are able to not only provide capital but also recognize what else they provide, whether it is the relationships across the whole ecosystem. Like Sam makes introductions for us and our team on almost a weekly basis, and a lot of those introductions have been extremely valuable for our community. And then also from a strategic perspective, I think these organizations are very new. They're very young. We have, community members with different backgrounds, and it's very valuable to bring on investors that have real world experience being on boards, making large strategic decisions at the highest level. And that was really our focus. And it's absolutely lived up to what our hope would be. We could not be more thrilled to have Blockchain.com on board.
Great. Well, Simon, just to wrap up, as we're getting close to the end of our time here, I wanted to ask you for a perspective on the regulatory environment for just crypto in general, and maybe DAO specifically. This is a topic that year in, year out we spend a lot of time on. It's not always clear what the outlook is. I think we've kind of touched on some things that are certainly encouraging. Is, we've talked about how people are becoming more educated on how crypto works. And that includes regulators and policymakers, and what the potential is around this technology. But yeah, give us your thoughts on the regulatory landscape. What are some things you're keeping an eye on? Are there any things you're concerned about? And any predictions around regulation for 2022 as well?
So I think DeFi right now and cryptocurrencies more broadly, it's very, very similar to the internet in 1995 before the Digital Information Act in 1996, which really represented kind of a regulatory wake up to the power of the internet, and also really opened the doors for a tremendous amount of innovation, a tremendous amount of new investments, a tremendous amount of growth in the internet. We're still waiting for that regulatory breakthrough that offers real long-term clarity on the future relationship between decentralized organizations and decentralized finance, and then the current global governments. However, with that said, I think we're far, far closer to a major breakthrough than people realize. I firmly believe that this is an absolute must solve problem for the governments of the Western world in order to remain competitive from a technological standpoint. It needs to be embraced, and innovation needs to be put in a regulatory framework that innovation can happen, and that innovation, like that true innovation can really like excel. And I think we're getting closer to that every day. There's tremendously improved relationships between the major players in cryptocurrencies and then the governments in both the United States and Europe. I see that continuing to play out. I see us continuing to work really closely with these governments, not as enemies or not as threats, but as real collaborators as we build a truly decentralized future. And I'm extremely excited for what the future of crypto regulation holds. And I think once we get to that watershed piece of regulatory legislation, it's going to open up the doors to a whole new universe of innovation and growth.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that. I think the regulators are often kind of positioned as the boogeyman, and there's, I think, too much fear around regulation. Historically, on the whole, I think in most markets, certainly in the U.S., regulation has been a net positive. It has just provided clarity. There are exceptions to this. And I'm not gonna name names. Certainly, some countries that have gone very far in trying to crack down. China, for example, I would argue is undermining their innovation economy, frankly. But that's not been the case in many other places like the United States, which have taken a more thoughtful approach and generally, on the whole, provided a net positive and greater clarity to the whole blockchain space. And my expectation is that's going to be true for DeFi and DAOs as well, as the potential for these new technologies and ways of coordinating work and financial activity and innovation are appreciated and realized, and policymakers recognize that to be an innovation economy, to attract the best brains around the world, you need to embrace DeFi, DAOs, blockchain technology, crypto, Web3, whatever you want to call it, rather than try to shut it down. Great. Well, Simon, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast, and we wish you the best.
Derek, thank you so much for having me. Just final huge shout out to Sam. He's been an awesome supporter of our community. He's been a great mentor to many community members. We're so thrilled to have Blockchain.com on board with Index Co-op. It's going to be an incredible 2022.
Sorry, and thank you for that. And Simon, also, where can people go to learn more about Index Co-op and yourself, and where can we send people?
So the best place to learn about Index Co-op is our website, indexcoop.com. And then I am very active on Twitter at BigSky7. And always thrilled when people reach out, always thrilled to touch base and talk all things Index Co-op and Web3.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you're enjoying our podcast, please rate us and leave a review, as it really helps boost our visibility to more listeners.